2024. Another year wrapped up for me. It's unbelievable. I started this channel almost 5 years ago now. I started this channel out of boredom during the COVID pandemic, and now it has grown into something I can't even imagine would be possible for me. And I can't thank you guys enough for the support of this channel. As for this year, it was probably my best year ever, with an incredible year worth of travels and trains. And you will see that coming up in just a second here. We start off the year on January 6th at Depew Station, and our first good train of the year was CSX B741 with a UP AC 6000 leading a CP AC 44. The next train would be Amtrak 64 with Amtrak 108 leading in Phase 6. About an hour or so later, CSX M560 rolls by with a brand new flared Mack rebuild leading and an ET23 trailing. The last train on this day would be Amtrak 63, having Amtrak 100 leading in the Midnight Blue livery. The next train would be on the 19th, with their first Eddystone train on CSX in a few years. This is CSX B115 with NS 8105 pushing the train on the rear. January 26th, NS took the Ayer, Massachusetts grain contract from CSX and ran their first NS 46A with mostly NS power, but had a BNSF Gevo on the rear with an Ace. Three or so days later, I caught NS 315 heading west towards Buffalo with my first ever KCS Gray Ghost, and it was leading, which made it a really nice catch for me. Of February didn't have much in store for me, but it did have a few nice trains. One of those being on February 4th in Depew with CSX M561 having 8 AC 4400 CW locomotives on that end, and giving the best horn show I've heard in person ever. The next day, I would take a trip down to Silver Springs and saw a CP 7021 sitting on a siding waiting for NS turn H52 to take it back to Buffalo to go back to the CPKC Railroad. On the 21st, I saw CSX B120 heading west back to BNSF with a nice BNSF Ace leading with an H1 trailing. The day after, me and some friends decided to meet up in Fairport, and we didn't see nothing good really besides Amtrak 63 having Amtrak 108 leading. The last train I saw in February would be NS 316 with NS 8098, the Conrail Heritage leading. My redemption from last year after I was going to see it leading 14M back in September of 2023 until my phone decided to die when it was right around the corner. During the first weekend of March, I went out rail fanning on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The first train of March in this video would be NS 265 with NS 8098 leading. next day I saw NS-316 heading out of Buffalo with a CPSD-70 ACU trailing second on that end. A few hours later, I would see CSX M363 meeting with CSX B119, with a BNSF fake bonnet repaint leading an NS SD70 ACC and a BNSF GEVO trailing in third. On the 6th, I saw CSX M367 heading west with a Northern Pacific GP9 bound for a museum up in Washington. Later that evening, I saw NS-90G heading west with an NS-9 leading NS-34. On the 14th, I saw CSX M363 heading towards Avon, with CSX Conrail Heritage number 1976 leading. A few days later, I would see CSX M565 heading west with CSX Seaboard System Heritage number 1982. On March 29th, I saw NS-46A with my first WFRX Mac trailing second on that end, and had a BNSF fake bonnet with a BNSF H2 on the rear pushing the train. went out to Depew and saw CSX M565 heading west into Buffalo, with the RF&P Heritage unit leading the train. In April, one of my close friends from Kentucky, whose name is Ethan, took Amtrak to New York and stayed with me for a week. We saw a lot of trains that week. First train on this list was on April 2nd with CSX P001 racing west of Batavia, New York, coming from Philadelphia going to Buffalo, before heading west the next morning. The next morning, we decided to go into Pennsylvania, to northeast Pennsylvania, and our first train was CSX B118, heading west with a nice trio of BNSF units and a nice horn show. A few hours and an air hose snap later, we see CSX P001 rounding the bend and racing west, giving us and some rail fans there that gathered a nice horn show. Our main attraction of this trip into Pennsylvania was to catch NS C62 with NS 3452, which at the time was the last active snoot-nose SD40-2 on the NS roster. Now it is stored more than likely in Altoona, Pennsylvania, awaiting rebuild into an SD40-3.
While C-62 was passing, we heard a horn in the distance and checked on CSX and found CSX M204 heading east with an unexpected Amtrak GP38 trailing third. We then heard another horn and then went back to NS and found NS-49A returning back to BNSF with a WFRX MAC trailing third on the train. After 49A passed, we went back to New York and decided to do an all-nighter at Depew Station. We saw a bunch of trains and a handful of good ones. The first one was CSX M560 with a BNSF ES44 leading as CNSD70M-2. About an hour or so later, B779 comes rolling by, heading up to CP429 to tie down. An hour or so later, CSX Y202 comes back with a Conrail caboose. We then went back to my house and got an hour and a half worth of sleep before we went to Fairport, New York to meet up with some friends. I'm going to keep quiet now and let you listen to CSX 6504 roll by with an incredible Leslie RS5T. The next train in this video is Amtrak 63 with Amtrak 100 leading. Unfortunately, it was now time for Ethan to leave, and the last train of New York we saw together was CSX M267 rolling west with a solo YN2 EC44 leading. This would, however, not be the last time we saw each other this year. A few days later, after Ethan left on April 12, CSX rerouted CSX Manifest 421 and M422 to go via Buffalo due to track work project in Baltimore, Maryland. First M422 rerouted up here would have CSX 3194, the spirit of our law enforcement, leading. On the 18th, I caught CSX 4568 leading I-003 West in Operation Lifesaver Colors. and a lot more dirty since the last time I saw it. On April 26th, I caught CSX B705 rolling out of Broadway with a KCSM Grey Ghost trailing behind a KCS Ace. The last train of April I would caught would be CSX B705 with CSX 911 leading. May is always the worst month for me train-wise. It's always due to me getting ready for final exams in school or stuff like that. I only saw 7 trains this month, which is tied with November. The first train on this list in May was on May 9th with NS 315 having NS 1071, the CNJ Heritage Unit, leading the way. It'd be several weeks until I caught something again. It wouldn't be until May 27th that I caught CSX M268 heading east with CSX 1982 leading solo and CSX 3194 in the middle of the train. The last train I'd see in May would be on the 30th with CSX M367 racing west with a UPSD 70 Ace leading a UP Jiva. June would be really active for me, and the first train on this list was on June 8th, and it was CN L531 with a 100th anniversary solo. next day I caught NS 310 with an insane lash up. 8 engines in total, including an ex-Southern GP38 high hood and NS 6963, the Go Rail unit. On June 11th, I caught word of CSX M422 having a special duo, and one of those units was CSX 1853, the New York Central Heritage. So I decided to go to Buffalo Terminal Station due to it being an ex-New York Central station. Leading was CSX 911, Spirit of our First Responders. The next day I saw CSX I-169 heading into Buffalo, with CSX 1871 trailing. On the 14th, I caught CSX G108 heading west with a pair of NS units and a BNSF Gevo. A few minutes later, CSX M627 got rolling west and had CSX 911 leading 1853 again, with an insane surprise third. Mid 3560 and an M420 was picked up in Rochester and was bound for the Delaware-Lackawanna in Scranton, Pennsylvania, making this probably my best train of 2024. On the 16th, I heard CSX 1899, the Pierre Marquette Heritage Unit, was leading I-162 East solo, so I went out and caught it leading. This unit is probably my favorite out of the Heritage fleet. after, I caught CSX M626 building their train in Frontier Yard, with CSX 1976 leading CSX 911. On the 21st, CSX 1853 came back, again trailing on M367. The next day I heard NS316 had one of NS Sonic bonnet units, so I went out and caught NS 4004 pushing NS 316 east, mid-train, looking decently clean. The next day, NS 4004 came back leading on NS 265, so I went out for it again and caught it at the same spot. On the 24th, I caught CSX B741 heading east with a really nice pair of UP AC6000 units. The next day I went to Fairport to meet up with some friends and caught a lot of trains, one of them being a W084, a Herzog ballast train. An incredibly rare sight was seen this day, as well, as CSX LO30 was using all three of the Rochester local engines, when it typically only uses one or two. The next train on this list was Amtrak PO63, with Amtrak 46 leading.
Yeah, it is 63.
The last train of June was CSX B779 with a pair of UPAC 44s heading eastbound.
Yeah, that's a CSX. Faster, faster. Speed up.
July was also active for me train-wise. The first train of July was a nice one with CSX 2756 trailing second, which at the time was the last ex-Conrail GP38-2 in service in YN2, and it is now sitting in Waterville, Maine storage, most likely never moving again. Later that evening, I caught NS 310 heading east with NS 1067, the Reading Heritage unit leading. The next day, I caught Amtrak 48 with Amtrak 164 trailing in Phase 4 with 2 private cars on the rear. The day after, I caught word of NS H52 leaving Bison with NS 8100, the Nickel Plate Road Heritage unit leading. On July 21st, I caught CSX IO-17 heading west with 1897, the Monon Heritage leading. The next day, I caught CSX B728 heading back to CPKC with a CP ES44AC leading, a KCS ET44AC on the rear. KCS only had 25 of these units, so it was nice to see one. July 25th, I caught NS 316 heading east with NS 1074 trailing second. The next day, me and some friends had a massive meetup in Fairport. Even though it was mainly boring, I decided to include this welded rail train in the video. next morning I saw CSX M560 parked at CP 429 with CSX 1852 leading the train. On the 31st, I caught NS 1072 trailing third on 315. Later that day, I caught CSX I-007 heading west with CSX 1875 trailing second. This would be the last train of July. August was the best month of the year for me, with an insane train count of 96, which is also mainly helped by the railfan trip I'd take later in the month. But we'll get there shortly. First, we gotta cover August 1st, when one of my good friends, Road Rails and Runways of Western New York, took me with him to see the last ever Hamburg Fair train. We'd see the train wait for NS14M to cross the Blaisdell Diamond before heading across with freshly painted BSOR 4212, which is a former Canadian Pacific MLW locomotive. While we waited for them to come back, we went over to CSX for some trains. The only train over here noteworthy was CSX B115 with a BNSF GE pair, but also CSX M561 being blocked by B115 with two Metro North locomotive trailing. We then decided it's been long enough and walked back to the Blaisdell Diamond and waited for the fair train to return. And soon enough it came crossing the diamond for the last time ever. then went down to the Scott Street Depot, where a massive crowd was waiting for its last arrival ever. On August 7th, CSX IO-10 had CSX 1967, the SCL Heritage Unit, leading. On August 13th, I was not expecting a NS-91X to be unloading ballast in my town, so I ran down as quickly as I could and caught it unloading with NS-8103, the Norfolk and Western Heritage Unit, trailing. On August 15th, I saw Amtrak P-284 racing east with Amtrak 130 leading. We now begin the incredible trip south with my friend Adam from Train Place 123 to go meet with my friend Ethan we saw earlier this year. We made a stop in Erie, Pennsylvania and saw an unexpected Wabtec test train with a brand new CM44 rebuilds for CSX. We also found GECX 3000, the battery demonstration unit. We would then head down to Kentucky, and our first train on this list would be CSX B710, with a pair of CPGEs trailing, third and fourth. We then went over to the CNO and TP, railfan NS, and unexpectedly caught NS 1065, the Savannah and Atlanta Heritage Unit, trailing on a northbound manifest. The next day, we'd head south to the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum to chase Southern Steam Locomotive 4501, leading the Somerville Special. Now, I don't want to include every clip, but I'll include 3. After chasing Southern 4501 to Somerville, we heard NS 733 heading north to Chattanooga, Tennessee. So we drove back as fast as we could and caught it with a Montana Rail Link SD70 ACE on the rear. We then went back to the TVRM and caught 4501 heading back to Chattanooga. We went back to Kentucky to railfan more of the CNO and TP, but NS would have a computer outage which shut down the line for several hours. Our first train after the outage was taken care of was NS 29F, with an NS-9 whiteface leading. There's only, I think, 4 or 5 of them left now in service. while later, we went up to the top of the bridge at Kings Mountain and caught NS 143 heading south, with a UP Givo leading with a UP AC 44 on the rear of the train. We then chased it south to our next spot and made it just in time. On day 4, we went rail fanning on the C&O and TP and caught NS 171 with a UP AC 44 in the middle of the train. Then caught NS 174 heading north at midnight, with NS 8101 trailing in a 6-engine consist. We attempted to chase it north but heard NS 179 calling signals, which also had a heritage. So we raced back to our spot and caught NS 1071 trailing on 179. The next day we'd catch NS 143 with a pair of BNSF units per power. Our last train in Kentucky would be NS 170 with a pair of 5 units on the head end. And now, unfortunately, this meant we had to leave Ethan. But hopefully we will meet up again in the near future. We then went up to Dashler, Ohio, known as the Crossroads Park. First train on this list is CSX B216, Phosphate empties, going to Mulberry, Florida, with a solo BNSF-9 on the point. The next train was CSX B118, empty Eddystone oil going back to BNSF with a trio of BNSF units. The next train was CSX I-172 heading east to North Baltimore, with 3 BNSF paint schemes lined up from newest to oldest. train of Daschler and the last train of the month in general was CSX W025, with a solo ES40 leading a welded rail train. First train of September would be NS 974, which was the NS safety train, going to Binghamton, New York. On September 22nd, I went out with my friend Adam to railfan for the day, and our first train of the day was NS 264 with two BNSF GEs powering the train. While we were heading towards Rochester to pick up one of Adam's friends, we stopped in Churchville for Amtrak 63, with Amtrak 130 leading the way. We then headed over to Blaisdell, New York to catch more trains and saw CSX B122 heading back to BNSF with a trio of BNSF H3 Chivos. The next train was CSX I-166, the CPKC transfer from Chicago to Montreal. I haven't seen this train since 2021. On September 25th, I caught word of NS 1066, with New York Central Heritage leading NS 309, so my friend Adam decided to be a huge help and allowed me to see it. and we chased it for a short distance before we split our ways. On September 29th, I caught CSX M204 with CSX 1869 leading. Later that evening, I caught NS-46A with a consist straight out of the 90s, a BNSF H1-9 leading a BN executive. The last train of September would be Amtrak 48, with Amtrak 145 leading Amtrak 125 in Phase 7 paint. We start off the month of October on the 5th in Fairport with a fitting train, CSX B117 heading east with a trio of BNSF units. The next train was Amtrak 64 with Amtrak 130 leading the way. Later that evening, Amtrak P281 had a Pullman private car in the rear. The next day, my friend Adam took me out for some rail fanning, and our first train was CSX M367 with CSX 1973 trailing. We then turned around and headed back towards Depew and saw CSX M363 that had been tied down for hours, with CSX 1853 leading. Our last train of the day was NS 315 with a pair of BNSF units. Later that day, however, NS-47A was coming back, so I went out and caught it with the BN Executive Mac. October 13th, I caught word of CSX I-165 having 4 LTEX GP35s trailing, so I went out to Blaisdell, New York to catch it in the cold rain. Before it came, however, I saw CSX I-017 with CSX 1827, the B&O Heritage Unit leading. About 45 minutes or so later, I-165 finally departed with the 4 LTEX GP35s. A minute after I-165 cleared, an almost 6-hour late Amtrak 48 races by, with Amtrak 130 leading the charge. It was late due to an NS intermodal having an intermodal container explode on the rear of the train in Indiana. On October 20th, I caught word of a CSX S988 heading east. However, CSX I-003 showed up first, with CSX 1827 leading. A few minutes later, S988 showed up with a UP Jevo leading 2 brand new Metro North SC42DM locomotives being delivered to Metro North. Amtrak 63 also showed up in the distance, with Amtrak 46 leading the train. The last train of October was CSX B725, with 2 CP AC 4400 CWMs leading the train. Like I said in May, November was just as bad as May, with only 7 trains. Our first train, however, was very nice, with a BNSF Jevo leading a BN Executive Mac on NS 264. On November 10th, I caught CSX I008 with 1852 leading CSX 1827. A very nice duo. The last train on this list for November was CSX I019, a peak season intermodal train with CSX 3194 leading the way. To start off the final month of the year, I went out on the 1st and caught CSX 3194 leading I017 westbound. On December 5th, less than an hour from my birthday, I went out for NS 309 with the last NS Heritage that I needed of the original 20, which was NS 8104, the Lehigh Valley Heritage Unit. On the 7th, I caught CSX M367 heading west with a pair of UP units. On the 15th, I caught CSX M367 heading west with CSX 1981, the Pan Am Railways Heritage leading. On the 18th, I caught CSX 1851, the NC and STL Heritage, trailing third on I-003.
No way.
On the 28th, I chased NS 60S with Adam down the southern tier with a CP Maroon Block ACU trailing second. After chasing 60S, we went back north to CSX to find a parade of eastbound B trains. First up was CSX B779 with a UP Tier 4 ace leading, with a UP Jibo trailing second. After failing to make it to the spot west of us to see CSX B705, we chased it east and finally caught up with it. It saw B705 with a CN-SD75I leading CN-3023, the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern Heritage Unit. On New Year's Eve, I went out for CSX M368 with CSX 1900, the Seaboard Airline Heritage Unit on the rear of the train. Randomly, sitting there was CSX M367 with a UP new paint trailing third on the train. A few minutes later, CSX M368 showed up with 1900 on the rear, and we chased it back to Rochester. After chasing M368, we heard CSX B780 coming back west with the same UP power from 3 days ago. So we decided to chase it back to my house. In 2024, I caught 445 trains, my highest train count for any year to date. It was an incredible year with the trains and my first railfan trip to the southern states in August, and some other trips I took as well. I hope you all have an amazing year, and before I go, I have to make a few announcements. I now have an official Discord server. If you guys would like to join, it is linked down in the description below. We host contests, game nights, and all that fun stuff. I got my permit on December 7th, and I am currently learning how to drive for the next almost 5 months. So by mid-June, I should have my license, and I can go to a lot more places and see a lot more trains. Well, that should be it from me now, so I hope you guys enjoy this music video I made. I basically made it as a quick recap, so I'll let you guys go and enjoy this. Anyways, this is official New York railfan pulling out of the station. I'll see you guys down the line. Have a good day.
I see your fire and brimstone. That billboard sign on the road. But you can't scare me to heaven with gasoline on my soul. This that back road baptism, weed smoking, syrup sipping, whiskey river carry me home. I've been known to find my kind of people. They ain't at home underneath church steeples. You'd be surprised the places I find Jesus. That ain't the regular crowd. I've been down and out. I'm better with the lost than the found. My solid ground is better with the lost than the found. I learned my lessons in dive bars. Had Sunday school on the streets. I've done my searching behind bars. Red letters setting me free. This that back road baptism, weed smoking, syrup sipping, whiskey river carry me home. I've been known to find my kind of people. They ain't at home underneath church steeples. You'd be surprised the places I find Jesus. That ain't the regular solid ground. It's that back road baptism, weed smoking, syrup sipping, whiskey river carry me home.